Reason.
Welcome to Faith and Reason, a program that looks at a lot of different issues from a Christian point of view. We're doing a program today that's looking at a movie that's quite popular right now. Taping this program early in December 2013, and Hunger Games, the second installment, is in the theaters right now. It was the most successful opening weekend of a November movie, and now the first weekend into December, still #1 in the box office, has done very well to start off. With me again, Pastor George Crespo, First Baptist Church at Cliffside Park. I'm Pastor Rick Spence, Fort Lee Gospel Church. And we're a couple old guys talking about a young person's theme, and so please give us some slack if we sound like old guys and complaining about these youth. But The Hunger Games is a movie that is hugely popular, and I think it bears some good discussion as to its Christian themes or lack thereof. And so, Pastor George, would you open up? What's a quick synopsis of these movies? I'm sure some of our viewers will not have watched them.
Yeah. First of all, I thought we were going to do Thor. I didn't know we were going to do.
I got the wrong movie.
You got me on the wrong skit. I thought we were going to do Thor tonight. No, just kidding. Well, first of all, the youthful part of me is always there. There's a boy inside of me, and I always love science fiction, and I love a great story. So that, you know.
Okay, I'll sound like
you'll sound like the old guy. I think it's. But the movies themselves are fantastic. They really are incredibly well done. Great work did. But the premise of the story is that it's in the future. There is this government that controls everything. There were these districts who had a rebellion against the government. The rebellion failed, and part of keeping the peace and paying for what they had done for their rebellion, every year they have to, a boy and a girl will be chosen between the age of 12 and 18 from those districts, and they would have to compete in these games where they literally will have to slaughter each other, and only one would survive. Well, the story begins with the 74th annual games, where this young girl, Katniss, takes the place of her sister and goes to the games. And she begins to bend and break the rules and not work the way they want her to work. And she shows compassion. She has this friend named Peter, who also is who's the guy who comes from the same district. She refuses to kill him. And at the end, when they try to force her to kill him, they choose, in a very love romantic kind of way, to die together better than sacrifice each other. They allow him to live. Now, this new movie, Catching Fire, is, again, the government is upset because this young girl's rebellion is literally catching fire. Okay. Now, people are catching on to what she did, and there's been a rebellious movement going on. And so, in the 75th games, what the president does is that he does what's called a quarter quell. Every 25 years, you take those who have won before, you put them in, and again, 2 are chosen from the district. Of course, this girl is the only one who's been in her district who's alive, who was a winner. So again, she has to go once again into these games. But we find out that in the midst, well, spoilers in case you want to watch the movie, just be careful.
Yes.
When she's playing in the games, we find out that there's going behind the scenes, that people have been working towards a revolution. And they take her out of the whole scene. They actually rescue her at the end because there's a revolution on its way, and obviously that'll lead to a third movie. Although the movie obviously ends in a way where you know it's going to be a third one, they are self-contained enough where you really get to enjoy them. But as films, they were, again, fantastic.
Okay. By way of my part, I watched the first one just recently. I watched the video of it. I have not seen the second one. My son watched both movies. My daughter is not, but they both read the books, so they said the books are well written. That's my connection to it. But again, movies have they tend to have various themes. Often one of the themes is a scapegoat. Tell us about the scapegoat, maybe how that connects to Christianity, and we'll take it in that direction.
Well, here in the scapegoat idea is where you see that these children basically are the vicarious sacrifice to keep the peace. Usually a scapegoat, Rene Girard wrote a great book called Scapegoat, which actually deals with this whole theme. And he shows that this is something that's happened within society quite often, happening in Jewish culture. Leviticus 16, they had the goat that they would, symbolically lay the sins upon that goat, and the scapegoat, and he would wander off into the wilderness and pay for the sins of the people.
Right.
Now that's pretty mild. In other societies, there was a human being that would be sacrificed. Or there were issues like this where, because of a rebellion, other societies would have to bring their best and have them slaughtered in one way or another. So this theme that she captures here is very common, and that's the idea of these individuals paying for this feud that's occurred, almost like a peace offering to keep things in certain kind of harmony. Now, Girard, what he does in that book, which I think is very fascinating, is that he shows that in Christ being the scapegoat, in him being the one who voluntarily gives himself to be the one to pay for us and to die for us, that the idea of scapegoat is removed from society and is seen as something oppressive and violent and evil that should never occur again.
I see.
And now that's important because here we're living, we see this story takes place almost like a post-Christian world.
Right.
And now Girard, ironically, in his book, he mentions that if we leave the Christian virtue, if we leave the idea of Christ as the sacrifice, as the scapegoat, we will go back to human sacrifice. We will go back to human scapegoats. And I find it ironic whether Susan, the lady who wrote the book, or whether she knew it or not, she was following Girard in his prophetic movement to say, if you let go of what Christ has done, society will go right back into this human sacrifice idea.
Right. So, if I'm hearing you right, let me just unpack it so I understand. I haven't read Girard's book, but I find it ironic that before Christ died on the cross, it was very common in various cultures around the world to offer sacrifices.
Yeah.
And it's become very uncommon now. It's been, Santeria does a little bit, and there's maybe a couple places, but all the ancient cultures stopped sacrificing in the way they used to, and that's tied to Jesus Christ. Now, what you're saying is that if we leave Christianity, eventually we'll go back to sacrificing, and that's essentially what
Which
this
is ironic,
futuristic
because
book
here's
is
a
doing.
futuristic book saying this is the way it's going to be, and yet Girard was saying this is the way it will be if you abandon Christ.
Okay.
Christ becomes the one who ends it all.
Okay.
He is the sacrifice to end all sacrifice. You no longer need a scapegoat. You no longer need a victim. You no longer need someone who's going to voluntarily come forward or be volunteered.
Right.
He does it, and therefore we are removed from it, and so is everybody else. On the contrary, we react to it now. When we see someone being scapegoated, like like the Jews were during Nazi Germany, we violently react eventually because we realize this is wrong. We react in our society when we see any kind of harm to someone else. We realize you should not take it out on somebody else.
Right. And even,
But again,
even now
this is because of the Christian virtues that have come through the sacrifice of Jesus.
Right, right. It's almost like the gay community has become the new, sacrificial, in other words, people get offended when gays are mistreated in our society.
But again, they will become even more mistreated, ironically, if you remove Christ from the picture.
Right.
Not the other way around,
right.
Which is what they think.
Okay, interesting point. Another theme related to that is the theme of voluntary sacrifice. How does that play out in the movie? I mean, obviously, this movie, just in general, the Katniss, I think her name is, she offers to go into the games on behalf of her younger sister.
Yeah, Primrose is her sister, and she's selected to go into the Hunger Games. And she does volunteer, whatever it's called, there's a title for it. And they're allowed to do that. You're allowed to volunteer and take the place of that person. But apparently it has never been done, or not done in the longest part of the history they can remember. And here she is, she comes forward and does this, and just sets out an inspirational movement, because in the second movie, other people are doing it. You see other people begin to volunteer and be willing to lay down their lives for someone else and take their place. Something that had not been seen is now being pushed forward because this girl is willing to come and sacrifice herself. And again, a very Christian theme.
Yeah.
Because of what Christ has done and his great sacrifice for us, it moves us to sacrifice ourselves for others and to live for others. And again, I find it just ironic that this theme is there. And you see it in the first movie, and you see it then inspiring others in the second movie.
Okay. Okay. Um, I heard one clip on the radio, a Christian movie critic saying that this is a very Christian movie because of this theme of self-sacrifice. Would you buy it, or would that be an overstatement? I may be exaggerating the way he put it as
Yeah,
well,
I
but
found it the other way around. I
mhm.
felt it's a very non-Christian movie
Okay.
because it tries to sell you Christian virtues without Jesus.
Right.
It tries to tell you somehow you can be a sacrificial person. You could do like what this girl did without any religious influence whatsoever, without any God whatsoever. You'll be able to do this. And that to me, the theme, of course, sacrifice is Jesus. We all know that. You know, we see it many times over in the movies. You see that voluntary movement forward to give their lives. Although Katniss is not portrayed as being perfect,
Right.
on the contrary, if there's anyone who's more perfect than her, is Peeta. Peeta comes across as a young man who has innocence, who has purity, so much so that in the second movie, she's determined to make sure, because he volunteers to take a place someone else. And she's determined that he will live. He must live.
I see.
Because there's a purity about him that she doesn't possess.
I see.
There's a corruption about her because she's aware that she's almost detached emotionally at times from people and things. She can't relate to others. So in that sense, she's not a Christ figure. But it is a Christ figure so far as the sacrificial element. In that sense, yes, you see the Christ element there, but no real correlation of Christ. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Religion's been removed, but you're trying to make it Christian.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's just unpack the religion part, because, I mean, it just seems that there is like zero religion. They stay away from the topic of religion almost intentionally. Is that how you portray?
Incredibly.
Yeah.
I don't know how they managed to do that, because to me it's like when you look at all societies, first of all, there is no atheistic culture that has ever existed. I don't know one that has ever existed. Even when you look at people who are tribal and you say, well, they believe in some sort of voodoo or something superstitious, something magical,
Right.
but there's always a transcendent, a other.
Right.
Yeah. In this movie, there is no transcendent.
Right.
There is no other.
Right.
It's almost like a perfect Marxist idea of government,
Right.
where the state is supposed to be everything,
Right.
and you should adhere to a state. But there's no mention of God, no mention of religion at all. On the contrary, one of the phrases that is used is the phrase says, "May the odds be ever in your favor." Random, pure luck.
Yep. Yep.
You know, and
Yeah.
I was like, wow, again, nothing at all that would tell us about religion. Despite the fact that in the midst of all this, there's this young girl who's killed during the Hunger Games. Rue is her name. And Katniss puts flowers around her, does this whole funeral thing. But no words are spoken,
No.
no sense of eulogy, no sense of devotion. But yet it looks very religious.
Yeah.
Only in the second movie, she kind of does like a eulogy after the fact about the greatness of Rue and what she meant and how she gave her life and all this.
Right. Right.
But no correlation. I'm just shocked. I mean, I don't know if the books are any different,
Yeah.
but in the movies, there is no God.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that they're trying to take religion out of the story. I mean, arguably, there's been enough movie writing or stories where they make religion evil, and that's clearly been, you know, often the case in various movies where religion is a negative. They don't bring any negative in that sense. You know, all the good and the evil are all religious, and they stay away from it altogether. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're talking about The Hunger Games, Catching Fire is the second movie that's in the theaters right now. We're going to take a look at our church, Fort Lee Gospel, and come back and continue our conversation. That was a clip of Fort Lee Gospel Church, where I'm the pastor. Also, Pastor George Crespo is at First Baptist Church in Cliffside Park, just down the road. You want to describe a bit about your church, how people can find you?
We're located at 777 Anderson Avenue in Cliffside Park. Our service is at 10 a.m. Sunday morning. We have Sunday school, and 11 a.m. we have worship service. December 15th, we have our Christmas service at 10:15 a.m. Also, December 24th, obviously, we have our Christmas Eve service at 8 p.m. Wednesday nights, we have Bible study and prayer meeting at 7:30 p.m. And we do have a website, firstbaptistcp.org, where you can go and hear the message as well as learn about our church.
Good. And yeah, Pastor George has visited our church. I visited his church. highly recommend you pay a visit to First Baptist. Um, as we're talking about Hunger Games, it's a extremely popular movie that's in the theaters. It's written with a youth audience in mind. And just before we went to break, we were just talking about how the whole story tries to edit God out of society. It's a futuristic society, and and I think it's a good point that, and I just want you to unpack this before we move on. You said there's never been a society without religion, and yet by implication, Marx was striving towards it. And yet, and I know you have a Cuban heritage, and maybe that speaks into this, but unpack that idea. Society without religion, is that a utopian ideal, and how does that live out in the real world?
I don't know if Marx was trying to create a society without religion. Maybe his society was that the state would be the religion. Okay. I think he was trying to replace it, as many people have. They're trying to find some sort of I think every culture is trying to be anti-religious. They know that there's a religious element in human beings. It is just part of the DNA of human beings.
Right.
It's unavoidable. If you look at the history of humanity, right back to the beginning, whether you take the Bible, where you take evolution, you're going to find the religious nature of man. Human beings always having these elements of trying to understand, because they face suffering, because they face death, because they face all these tragedies. They want to know there's meaning. They want to know there's purpose. And every culture you see this kind of movement of trying to have connection with the divine, with the other. And there's been no culture. There's never been a society that's been completely atheistic. And you know, if anything came close to that, it would have been Russia trying to impose that Marxist mentality upon people. But again, there was a rebellion. So much so that now Marxism has gone down, the government has changed in Russia, and religion again is flourishing in Russia, just as it does all over the world. We always imagine that atheism is the majority, but it's actually a very extreme minority. The majority are people who are religious, even if it's witchcraft or Wicca or whatever it is. You have some sort of belief in something other than yourself, and just saying that, oh, there's no God, there's nothing, it all ends. Yet here in this society, it seems like it's all running perfectly well in that sense, so far as their own government, but no mention at all. I mean, nothing, not even, not negative, not positive, nothing at all, which is so odd.
Yeah. Let me bring us back to Hunger Games. One thing we've just sort of glossed over, and that is, it's a fairly violent story where you in essence, you're putting 26 children together, 12 to 18 years of age, saying one winner, everyone else gets killed. How would you describe the violence? And certainly, maybe that's part of the appeal. I think people want, violent sells or makes the story interesting. Respond to the violent side of the story. How would you see that?
Yeah, violence does sell, obviously, and people do like that. I don't know how the books relate the violence. I do know in the first film, and I'll get your reaction as well, I thought it was done tastefully. I thought it could have been much more gory in the way they portrayed the death and stuff. They did it kind of quickly, kind of brushing it, kind of fast camera type, where you don't really see the magnitude of some child being slaughtered. There are points where you do see, like the little girl who gets killed and stuff like that. But other than that, you really don't see a whole lot of the slaughter. It's almost like implied or seen quickly. And I thought that was pretty tasteful. I think that humanity today, society, despite the fact that we are in some ways very decadent, and we do enjoy the violence, we don't enjoy violence to children. There's something in our nature still, thank God, praise God, there's something wholesome within our nature still right now that says when we see children being harmed, even in a fictional sense, we react to it. We're like, ooh. And some films have crossed that line. And maybe that's a bad sign, that the more they cross that line and becomes acceptable, we'll become numb to it. But we still have a reaction to that, and I think they try to handle that. In the second movie, they didn't care. Because second movie, we're talking people who already were in the Hunger Games, and then now they're older. Some of them are adults. So they didn't have any problem showing the violence there and showing more brutality there. And I think that's part of the reason.
Yeah, That makes sense. From talking to my kids a little bit, they did say the book gives a lot of detail
Oh, I see.
in the deaths, you know.
Wow.
But and that's part of, you know, the author. Uh, of course, you know, with movies you don't have the same time that you have in. It's a series of 3 books, so there's a lot of room, and I think they're making it into 4 movies. I think it's 4, not even 3.
Trying to stretch it like Twilight.
Trying to stretch, yeah, they get a little more money out of us, but certainly, and yeah, that's one thing. You know, certainly in movies there's a lot of deaths, and it's a lot easier to watch adults being killed by some, you know, superhero or whatever. There's been a lot of those. What are some of the other values or ethics that are being promoted in this movie?
Again, what fascinates me, and you know, seeing the movies, I was taking notes and looking at this, and the second time, 'cause I saw The Hunger Games the first time in the theaters, and this time I borrowed the movie and I saw it again, and I was just amazed because you see love, kindness, forgiveness, mercy, even to a point where, you know, at the end of the movie, you know, the first the rules are changed and they're told 2 people can survive. So if Peeta and Katniss look like they're lovers, it look like they'll both be able to survive, but then in the end they're told, no, one must live, the other must die, and Katniss refuses, Peeta refuses, we will die together. It's this great love in a non-Christian world. I'm like, it's all the Christian virtues without Jesus.
Right.
And I think the only reason you can get away with that is because we're still in a Christian society. We're still a Judeo-Christian society. And although we try to get rid of the foundation, although we have demolished so many things, they still have that as part of their structure. Once that falls, I think we'll see the facade.
Yeah.
The facade is that the real ethics that come in a post-Christian world are Nietzschean ethics. And Nietzschean ethics is basically the will to power. The stronger is the one who wins. And that's what the Hunger Games should have been.
Yeah.
That's what society really will be without Christ. It will be Nietzschean. It will be, I am smarter, I am stronger, I will kill you, I will win. None of this, I have compassion, I have love, I have mercy. Those are Christian virtues that even so in the Roman Empire, which this empire is tried to portray like the Roman Empire, where they're very decadent and they're really lifeless.
Yeah.
They have to literally, you know, they puke so they could eat more. I mean, it's very Roman. But also all these virtues did not exist in the Roman Empire. On the contrary, the things that we know as Christian, you know, kindness, humility, were seen as weakness.
Yeah.
And something that is not to be imitated or looked after. We should have shunned those kind of things. And Nietzsche would agree. But the Christian gospel says, no, this is what makes us more like God.
Yeah.
But that's completely, again, it's Christian virtues in a completely non-Christian world,
Right.
which makes no sense.
Right.
Why would you sacrifice yourself? If there's no transcendent, there's nothing, why not kill Peeta? What's the big deal?
Right.
I don't get it. I mean, do you? I don't understand.
No, I understand. Yeah, and even because I saw the first movie, the romance was almost a facade. It was
fake.
It was a fake romance to gain support, because this is all being watched by society as watching these games take place. They're watching the killing of these children, even though they're in this big forest. And yeah, the other thing is, I know, and maybe you can add to it from the second program, is that the experienced Hunger Game, who was the trainer of these children in the first, he became a hardened alcoholic, basically. And so almost like they're showing that there is a consequence. If you're going to be a killer, you are going to change. And did it go further than that on the other program?
Well, he's still an alcoholic. He's just, he acknowledged even in the second film that you'll never be the same.
After
Not only
killing,
does it change you, but now every year you have to put on this show where you go on tour and you do this and you do that, and he's just distraught. Katniss herself in the second film is no longer the young girl. She's someone who's now suffering already. She has nightmares. She'll wake up in the middle of the night screaming. In one scene, she wakes up screaming. Peeta's coming in and says, "Yeah, me too. I can't sleep." And she'll go hunting, and all of a sudden she'll see herself in the one scene where she actually shoots the arrow into a young man. She goes to shoot a turkey, and as soon as she shoots the arrow, she sees the young man, and she starts screaming. And again, uh, completely traumatized, completely destroyed by it. Yeah, there is no peace. And of course, the society that looks at them doing this, it's almost, again, they're living vicariously through them.
Right.
The president and all these people have no soul. They have nothing. And I think it's an interesting commentary upon our society, because think about it. Our society today is doing part of that. We're watching all these live shows. What does it say about us when we need to see other people do Survivor and do this and do that? Why?
Yeah.
Is it because we have no soul? We have no life? We need to vicariously live through these people now?
Is that the reality television?
A little bit of a social commentary there.
Watching the train wreck.
That we are becoming lifeless individuals. We are dead, we're numbed, and so we literally have to kill people to feel some sort of liveness for a moment.
Having said all that, we have about a minute and a half left. My comment first, and then you wrap us up. It seems that when it comes right down to it, Christianity is so essential to understanding human nature, to understanding our calling to worship, to give us a sense of groundedness that makes sense. And here you've got a storyline that is using a part of that. And I guess maybe the calling would be to say, we need to come back to biblical worship and being a part of following Jesus Christ, being a part of church, and that's what we're about. That's why we do these things. Any further comment before we wrap up in a few minutes, a few seconds?
As C.S. Lewis would say, and C.S. Lewis was a great theologian, a great fictional writer, more Christians need to pick up the pen and write the great stories, because they'll write the best stories, because they'll be centered on Christ.
Good thought, and good way to end. Again, something in us wants a good story. We've been talking about the Hunger Games, mixed reviews, but again, there's a story there, and it's well done in terms of movie making. You've been watching Faith and Reason. Trust you have a great day, and go to church and read your Bible.
Thank you for watching Faith and Reason. Please join us again next week. We invite you to come and